The sky matched her sorrow, gray, heavy, and unmoving. Rain threatened to fall but held back, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Olivia stood at the edge of the grave, her black veil clinging to her cheek like a silent mourner. Around her, friends, business partners, and distant family members whispered condolences that barely touched her. She couldn't hear them, couldn't feel anything, really, except the dull ache of disbelief that her husband, Nathaniel Caldwell, was gone. Gone, just like that. A car crash, a few phone calls, a body. And now this. The priest's voice faded into a blur as the casket was lowered into the earth. But Olivia stayed still, her fingers wrapped tightly around the single white rose in her hand. The man she'd built a life with, the man who once held her as she sobbed over miscarriages, who kissed her on their yacht under Sicilian sunsets, was now just a name etched into marble. She turned away from the grave just as the first fat drop of rain splashed onto her shoulder. That's when she saw her. Standing just beyond the gathering, dressed in sleek black with crimson lips and oversized sunglasses, was her sister, Valerie, and in her arms a baby. Olivia's breath caught. Valerie hadn't been invited. In fact, they hadn't spoken in over 4 years, since a bitter falling out involving Olivia's refusal to lend her money after yet another failed business scheme. She looked older now, but not worn. Polished, prepared. Valerie stepped forward slowly, deliberately, the baby swaddled in pale blue cashmere. Olivia felt every eye turn. "I'm sorry for your loss, Olivia," Valerie said, voice syrupy and insincere. "Nathaniel was important to me too." There was a flicker of confusion across the mourners' faces. Before Olivia could respond, Valerie adjusted the blanket in her arms and continued, "I thought it was time you met his son. This is Michael." A stunned silence fell over the cemetery. Olivia blinked. "What did you just say?" Valerie gave a tight, victorious smile. "Michael Caldwell. Nathaniel's child. Born 7 weeks ago. I thought, as his legal heir, he should be present to say goodbye." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Olivia stared at the baby, his tuft of dark brown hair, his delicate chin. Her stomach turned. She looked at Valerie, who coolly pulled a folded document from her purse and held it out. "Birth certificate," she said. "Father's name, Nathaniel Caldwell." Olivia let out a laugh. Sharp. Disbelieving. It was too absurd, too theatrical to be real. Valerie? Claiming to have had her husband's baby? At his funeral? "You always did love drama," Olivia said, voice cracking. "But this is low, even for you." Valerie didn't flinch. "I'm not here for theatrics. I'm here for what my son is entitled to, his father's legacy. Half of the estate." Someone gasped. Olivia's knees nearly buckled, but she stood tall, clutching her rose like a weapon. Valerie's eyes sparkled with something dangerous, certainty, like she had rehearsed this moment, like she had won. But Olivia wasn't ready to surrender, not to grief, not to betrayal, and certainly not to her. The quiet of Olivia's estate had once been a comfort, a refuge built on polished marble and quiet views of the lake. Now it echoed like a tomb. Every ticking clock, every closing door, reminded her of what she'd lost. But worse than grief was the storm of suspicion clawing at her insides. She hadn't slept since the funeral. The image of Valerie, smirking, confident, cradling a baby, played in a cruel loop behind her eyes. Olivia wanted to believe it was a lie. It had to be. Valerie had always been a manipulator, a performer. She wore deception like perfume. And Nathaniel? For all his faults, he couldn't have done this. Not to her. Still, Olivia couldn't ignore the way her heart clenched when she'd looked at the child. The shape of his nose, the color of his eyes. She had to be sure. She needed truth, even if it shattered her. Her lawyer, Greg Hammond, wasted no time arranging the test. "We'll handle it quietly," he assured her. "Discreetly. No press, no leaks." A nurse came to Valerie's condo under the pretense of a routine checkup. Valerie, smug and fully cooperative, swabbed the baby's cheek with a knowing look. "You'll owe me an apology," she'd said. Olivia said nothing. She didn't argue. She didn't scream. She just waited for 5 excruciating days. On the morning of the results, Olivia sat in Nathaniel's home office, surrounded by his things, his Mont Blanc pens, his leather-bound notebooks, the faint lingering scent of his cologne. The man she married had always been precise, proud, and deeply private. A man of rituals, who never missed anniversaries, who left handwritten notes on her pillow after business trips. What kind of man did that, and this? Her lawyer entered the room holding a sealed envelope, his expression unreadable. She reached for it with trembling fingers, slicing it open with a letter opener that used to sit on Nathaniel's desk. As she unfolded the paper, her eyes scanned the words. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Time stopped. Her breath caught. She reread it. And again. Her hand shook. She pressed her palm to her mouth, but the sob broke through anyway. A low, guttural sound that didn't even feel like her own. He had done it. Nathaniel had fathered a child with her sister. The paper dropped from her fingers. Greg stepped forward, but Olivia waved him off. She didn't want comfort. Not now. Not from anyone. Her mind screamed for explanation. When? Why? How long? But there were no answers. Only the silence of betrayal echoing louder than any storm. She sank onto the leather chair, staring at the wall where Nathaniel's diploma still hung, symbols of a man who seemed untouchable, impeccable. Her protector, her partner, her illusion. Tears burned, but she wiped them away with the back of her hand. Valerie had broken every code of family. Nathaniel had broken every vow of love. She wasn't just mourning a man anymore. She was mourning the truth. And something in her hardened. Valerie might have the baby. She might have the headlines. She might even have the DNA test. But Olivia had one thing left. The will to fight. And she wasn't done. Not even close. Olivia always believed a good marriage was built on trust, not perfection. And Nathaniel had been her anchor, measured, charming, deliberate in everything he did. Their love wasn't always loud, but it had felt steady, deep, and sacred. Or so she thought. Now, every memory felt poisoned. Days after the DNA test shattered her world, Olivia found herself pacing the corridors of their grand estate like a ghost. The house, once filled with warmth and music, felt cold, foreign, like someone else had lived here, someone pretending to be her husband. The unraveling began in Nathaniel's study. She had avoided it until now, too afraid to confront the place where he'd spent hours on conference calls and reviewing deals. But now, driven by a gnawing need to know, Olivia stepped inside and shut the door behind her. His desk was immaculate, too immaculate. Olivia knew Nathaniel. He was meticulous, but not sterile. Something felt off. She opened the drawers. Paper clips, old receipts, a bottle of cologne. In the bottom drawer, she found a stack of folders tied neatly with a silk ribbon. Contracts, legal files. But then, tucked beneath a ledger, her fingers brushed something cold and metal. A key. Not to the house. Not to his office. This was something she'd never seen before. Her heart quickened as she scanned the room, eyes finally landing on the small wall cabinet behind the bookshelf, one she always assumed held old cigars or brandy. She tried the key. Click. Inside was a small, matte black safe. Fingerprint scanner. Code locked. She hesitated. Then she remembered something, an anniversary. 11/04. The night they first kissed under city lights on a Paris balcony. She entered it. Beep. Unlocked. Inside were files, a flash drive, a second phone. But what crushed her most was the envelope with her name on it. Olivia. In Nathaniel's handwriting. Her stomach twisted. She opened it and found 3 folded letters, aged just weeks before his death. They weren't love letters. They were confessions. One detailed a moment of weakness with Valerie. It meant nothing, he wrote, but she used it against me. Another described his fear Olivia would never forgive him if she knew. The third? It was worse. It was full of apologies he never had the courage to say aloud. The phone buzzed as she powered it on. Dozens of messages, most from Valerie. Don't forget the trust fund paperwork. She's asking questions again. I'll handle her. Olivia's hand went cold. Valerie hadn't just betrayed her. She had manipulated Nathaniel, used guilt, used the child, and Nathaniel, her brilliant, broken husband, had let it happen. She read texts between them spanning months, photos, hotel confirmations, transactions. It wasn't just an affair. It was a second life, and she had lived in its shadow. Olivia sat on the floor, surrounded by documents, digital trails, and truths she couldn't unlearn. The woman Nathaniel claimed to love, the woman who wore his ring, was a stranger to the man these letters described. Her marriage hadn't ended with his death. It had unraveled long before that, she just hadn't seen it. But now she did, and with that clarity, something inside her clicked. This wasn't about grief anymore. This was about deception, legacy, survival. She wasn't just betrayed, she had been played. And the game had just begun. The law office smelled of polished mahogany and money. Olivia had been there before, once, years ago, when Nathaniel updated their joint will after her second miscarriage. Back then, they sat hand in hand, making plans for a future filled with hope, children, and quiet retirement by the sea. Now, she sat alone. Greg Hammond, their family attorney for over a decade, avoided her eyes as he placed a thick, cream-colored envelope on the table. The air felt heavy, like the moment before a bomb goes off. There's something we didn't anticipate, he said quietly. Olivia's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Greg sighed, removing a few pages from the envelope. Nathaniel amended his will a month before his death. It was filed quietly. I didn't see it until yesterday because he had it expedited and sealed for privacy. She stared at the papers. He didn't tell me. Greg hesitated. He didn't tell anyone. He slid the top page across to her. Olivia read it. Her stomach turned. Nathaniel had designated Michael Caldwell, the child Valerie brought to his funeral, as a beneficiary of his estate. A significant portion, 40%, was placed in a trust to be released when the boy turned 18. But the more devastating detail came next. Valerie Monroe was named the child's legal guardian and trustee of the funds. Olivia's hands trembled. She's getting control of the money? She said, barely above a whisper. Greg nodded. Unless we can challenge the will. But with the DNA test already confirming paternity, it'll be an uphill battle. Legally, Nathaniel had every right to designate his child and a guardian, regardless of the circumstances. Olivia stood abruptly, backing away from the table as if the documents were on fire. She manipulated him, she said. She trapped him. And now she gets to walk away with $20 million? Like some prize? Greg tried to calm her. We'll contest it. But we'll need evidence. Proof that he wasn't of sound mind or that she coerced him. She blackmailed him, Olivia snapped. I know it. I found texts. Letters. She knew exactly what she was doing. She could barely breathe. It wasn't just about money. It was the final insult. Nathaniel had left her, the woman who had stood by him for 15 years, with silence and confusion, while Valerie, her reckless, self-serving sister, had been handed power, legally, financially, publicly. And suddenly, Olivia understood why Valerie had walked into the funeral with her head held high, why she wasn't afraid. She had planned this. Or, worse, she had helped Nathaniel plan it. You need to find a way to freeze that trust, Olivia said, her voice steadying with resolve. She doesn't get to win. Greg nodded. We'll begin immediately. But Olivia, she turned to him, her eyes dark. This is going to get ugly. She smiled bitterly. It already is. As she left the office, papers clutched tightly in her hand, Olivia felt the last thread of her old life snap. Her husband's betrayal, Valerie's deceit, the looming media circus, everything was spiraling. But she wouldn't be the woman left weeping at a graveside. She'd be the one digging up the truth and burying the lies. The glossy pages of elite society lay open on Olivia's marble kitchen island, mocking her with a headline that felt like a slap. The other woman of a billionaire, Valerie Monroe's rise to power. The photograph beneath the title was unmistakable. Valerie, draped in diamonds and designer silk, smiled with a confidence that stung. In her arms, the baby, the very symbol of the betrayal, was dressed impeccably in a cashmere sweater, his curious eyes staring into the camera lens as if already aware of the game being played. Olivia stared at the image, her throat tight. She had seen the public shift in sympathy already, how whispers in boardrooms and charity galas had turned, how her own friends offered hesitant condolences, eyes flicking away as if afraid to be associated with her tragedy. Valerie was winning. It wasn't just about the money or the baby anymore. It was a carefully curated narrative, and the world was eating it up. "She's everywhere," Olivia whispered to Greg Hammond, who stood quietly in the kitchen, a tablet in hand displaying multiple news alerts and social media posts. Magazines, TV interviews, charity events, they're calling her the tragic mother and misunderstood lover. Greg shook his head. "It's a PR machine, Olivia. They've hired top-notch publicists. Valerie knows exactly how to spin this." Olivia's fists clenched. "And here I am, grieving, alone, watching my own sister rewrite the story of my husband's death." The walls of her home seemed to close in, filled with shadows of memories now stained with betrayal. The grand estate she and Nathaniel had built together was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battleground. Valerie had moved into one of Nathaniel's luxury condos downtown, and her name had started appearing alongside his in whispered gossip columns. Olivia overheard the way acquaintances shifted conversations the moment she entered a room. Sympathy was there, but distant, hesitant. Even Nathaniel's business associates were hesitant to take her side, fearing they might lose favor with the new heir and his formidable trustee, Valerie. But Olivia wasn't about to disappear into the background. She watched Valerie's rise with a mixture of fury and calculation. Every smile Valerie gave the cameras was a challenge, a dare. But behind that polished facade, Olivia knew the truth. Valerie was reckless, selfish, and dangerous. Her sister had gambled everything on this child, on this fortune. But Olivia was no stranger to risk. If Valerie wanted a war, Olivia was ready. That night, sitting alone in the vast living room, Olivia opened a drawer and pulled out a small velvet box Nathaniel had given her years ago. Inside was a delicate locket engraved with their wedding date. Her fingers traced the cool metal as tears welled in her eyes, not just for what was lost, but for what was still left to fight for. "I won't let you rewrite his legacy," she whispered to the silence. Outside, the city lights flickered, indifferent to the family feud tearing apart the heart of a fortune. Valerie might have the spotlight, but Olivia had something far more dangerous: truth, resolve, and the fire of a woman who refused to be erased. The battle for Nathaniel's legacy was only beginning. Olivia's world had already shattered, but now she felt the jagged edges slicing deeper than she ever imagined possible. The public battle with Valerie was only the surface. Beneath it lay shadows, dark corners of her husband's life she had never dared explore, until now. The first step was hiring a private investigator, Maxwell Trent, a man known for his discretion and a reputation for uncovering truths others desperately tried to hide. "I want everything," Olivia told him in a hushed voice during their first meeting in a dimly lit office. "Every bank account, every phone record, every meeting. I want to know who my husband really was in those last months." Maxwell nodded, his expression unreadable. "You're about to find out the truth can be a dangerous thing." Over the next few days, the revelations came like a relentless storm. Nathaniel's pristine public image was crumbling. Maxwell uncovered a second bank account, hidden offshore, with regular transfers amounting to tens of thousands of dollars each month. The recipient? Valerie Monroe. "I've seen blackmail money with less regularity," Maxwell remarked dryly when he handed Olivia the financial statements. More troubling were the photographs, snapshots from surveillance footage showing secret meetings in secluded cafes and private parking garages. Nathaniel, always the polished businessman, was seen exchanging envelopes with a shadowy figure Maxwell traced back to an offshore insurance company notorious for shell corporations and opaque dealings. Olivia's hands trembled as she absorbed the information. Why would he risk everything? The company, the family reputation. Maxwell looked her in the eyes. Because someone was holding a gun to his head. Or maybe the threat was even worse. Exposure, ruin. The weight of suspicion pressed on Olivia. She began to question everything. Had Nathaniel been caught in a web of lies deeper than she imagined? Was Valerie's sudden claim just one thread in a tapestry of deceit? As she pored over bank statements and coded messages late into the night, a terrifying thought took root. Nathaniel's death might not have been an accident. The signs pointed to something far more sinister. One evening, Olivia found a cryptic email among Nathaniel's deleted files, only recovered by Maxwell's tech team. It read, "The brakes. Make sure the package arrives on time. We can't afford mistakes." She stared at the screen, heart pounding. What package? Whose brakes? That night, sleep eluded her. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret. She wasn't just fighting for an inheritance anymore. She was fighting for the truth, and for justice. But the deeper she dug, the clearer it became. Someone powerful didn't want the truth to come out. Valerie's confident smile wasn't just a performance, it was a warning. Olivia closed her laptop, the weight of secrets pressing down like a lead shroud. The battle had entered the shadows, where lies thrived and trust died. The night Nathaniel died had been called a tragic accident, a catastrophic brake failure on a rain-slicked road, a cruel twist of fate that no one could have predicted. But Olivia had learned to trust nothing at face value. Maxwell Trent's findings had opened a darker door, and now every detail from that fatal night was under scrutiny. What had once been a neatly closed case was unraveling thread by thread. Olivia sat in her dimly lit living room, a folder of freshly gathered reports spread across the coffee table. Her eyes burned with sleepless fatigue as she sifted through the forensic analysis, accident reconstruction, and police notes. But it was the private investigator's most recent report that made her blood run cold. Tampered brakes, Maxwell had said simply, and missing surveillance footage from the highway cameras. Missing footage? She had never imagined it possible. How do you erase a moment forever? Yet the evidence was there, a gap in the timeline, a hole where the cameras should have recorded everything. Her fingers trembled as she read the mechanic's statement, a whisper of sabotage hidden in technical jargon, brake lines cut, fluid drained, a death engineered to look like a tragic mistake. Olivia closed her eyes, the weight of betrayal settling deeper than ever before. Someone had planned this. Someone who knew Nathaniel. Someone with access. Her mind raced through the people closest to him. Valerie, of course, was a prime suspect, the woman who stood to inherit millions, whose manipulations had already poisoned their family. But the puzzle pieces didn't fit so neatly. There were others. Business rivals, disgruntled partners, even people inside Nathaniel's own company who had reasons to want him gone. But one name echoed louder in her mind than any other. Her own husband. Had Nathaniel's secrets caught up with him? Had he made enemies in places Olivia never imagined? She leaned back, trying to piece together what Maxwell had uncovered about suspicious meetings and offshore dealings. Was the insurance policy linked to the crash? Was it an arrangement gone wrong or a cover-up? A sudden knock at the door broke her reverie. It was Maxwell, holding a folder thick with new information. "We found more," he said grimly. "Phone records from the day of the accident. Calls to someone identified only as M and financial transfers flagged for investigation." Olivia's heart hammered. "Who is M?" she asked. Maxwell shook his head. "No idea yet, but whoever it is, they're connected to everything. His offshore accounts, the tampered brakes, the missing footage." Olivia clenched her fists, anger and fear twisting inside her. This wasn't an accident. It was murder. Her voice was steady, but inside, chaos raged. She thought of Nathaniel's smile, the man she loved and the man she barely knew. The husband whose secrets had destroyed their life, and whose death was now wrapped in lies. And the woman who held the baby, the sister she once trusted, had been the one who took advantage of all the chaos. But Olivia wasn't done. Not yet. She vowed silently to herself. She would uncover every secret, expose every lie, and find justice for the man she once loved. Because a death this convenient couldn't go unanswered. The courtroom was tense, suffused with the sterile smell of polished wood and nervous energy. Olivia sat rigid in her chair, the weight of the past months pressing on her like a vice. She was no stranger to pain, but today's revelation threatened to shatter everything she thought she knew about the tangled web that had engulfed her life. Valerie sat across the room, a picture of confidence as always, cradling baby Michael in her arms. The media frenzy outside had finally died down, but inside these walls the truth was about to cut deeper than any headline ever could. Olivia's lawyer, Greg, whispered, "This second DNA test is court-supervised. No chance for manipulation." Olivia nodded, though her heart pounded fiercely. The first test had broken her world. But this one? It could either shatter what little foundation remained or expose a devastating lie. The medical examiner entered, holding a sealed envelope. The judge called the courtroom to order and asked the examiner to read the results aloud. A hush fell. The results indicate that the child is not biologically related to Valerie Monroe. The words hit Olivia like a tidal wave. She blinked, trying to comprehend. "Not Valerie's child?" Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Valerie's face shifted imperceptibly, a flicker of unease betraying her usual poise. Greg stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this changes everything. The woman claiming to be the mother is not biologically related to the child she's presenting as hers." Olivia's mind raced. The puzzle pieces no longer fit neatly. If Valerie wasn't the mother, then whose child was this? And why was Valerie so desperate to claim him? Outside the sterile courtroom, the whispers began anew. Suspicions, rumors, speculation. But Olivia felt something colder, more certain. This baby was the key to a deception far more tangled than she had imagined. She remembered the hospital bills she'd uncovered, the discreet payments Valerie had made over the months, the quiet maternity ward where no one had asked questions. A baby born under shadows. Her fingers tightened on the armrest. Valerie had paid for the birth. She had orchestrated everything. But for what? Olivia's thoughts turned to Nathaniel's secret life, the hidden phone, the offshore accounts, the shadowy figures Maxwell had traced. She realized now that the baby wasn't just a bargaining chip. He was part of a larger scheme, a cruel manipulation designed to wrest control of the estate. But whose child was he? Greg approached quietly. "There's another woman, Olivia. One who had an affair with Nathaniel, someone he was supporting quietly. She died under mysterious circumstances shortly after giving birth." Olivia's breath caught. The shadows she had been chasing were suddenly illuminated with painful clarity. Valerie had taken that child, used him, weaponized him. The betrayal was deeper, darker than she had feared. But Olivia's resolve hardened. This was no longer about fighting her sister or mourning a lost husband. This was about protecting an innocent life tangled in the wreckage, and about reclaiming the truth, no matter the cost. As the gavel struck, signaling a recess, Olivia stood tall. The road ahead was dangerous, but for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of purpose burning bright. She would uncover the full story, expose every lie, and make sure that no one, not even Valerie, could use that baby, or the legacy of her husband, to destroy her. The truth had a way of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deeply it was buried. For Olivia, the revelations about the baby's true origin were just the beginning, a painful doorway to secrets that had festered in the dark, concealed by lies and silence. Her private investigator, Maxwell Trent, had uncovered the name that shattered her remaining illusions, Isabella Marquez. A name she hadn't heard before, but one tied irrevocably to Nathaniel Caldwell's hidden past. Isabella was the woman Nathaniel had been supporting quietly for months, a woman unknown to the world, kept far from the glaring spotlight of his public life. Olivia's heart clenched as she learned the details. Isabella had been pregnant with Nathaniel's child. The pregnancy was never public, never acknowledged. Their affair had been a secret, a fragile thread woven into a tapestry of deception. But tragedy had struck. Isabella died under mysterious circumstances shortly after giving birth, her death ruled accidental, but whispers of foul play had begun to circulate in hushed tones. Maxwell's investigation hinted at something darker, a cover-up, a silencing. Valerie had paid for the hospital birth. She had stepped into the shadows, claiming the child as her own, weaponizing innocence as leverage to seize control of the Caldwell fortune. Olivia's chest tightened with a mix of fury and heartbreak. Her sister had betrayed everything. Not just her, but the memory of a woman who never had a voice and a child caught in the crossfire. That baby was more than an heir. He was a living, breathing reminder of secrets kept too long. Olivia found herself standing at Isabella's gravesite on a crisp autumn morning, the weight of the past pressing down as leaves fluttered like whispers around her. The grave was simple, unadorned, a stark contrast to the grandeur surrounding the Caldwell estate. "I didn't know you," Olivia whispered, voice thick with emotion. "But I promise, I'll fight for you. For him, for the truth." Back at the estate, Olivia's resolve hardened into steel. The battle ahead was not just legal, but moral. She needed to expose Valerie's deceit without destroying the innocent child who had been thrust into this cruel war. She called a meeting with Greg and Maxwell. "We have to challenge Valerie's guardianship," Olivia said firmly. "But carefully. The child deserves safety and love, not to be a pawn." Greg nodded. "We'll need evidence of fraud and coercion, and proof of Valerie's involvement in Isabella's death." Maxwell's expression was grim. "That won't be easy. Valerie is ruthless and she's covered her tracks well." But Olivia wasn't deterred. She had lost a husband, a sister, and a future she never imagined could slip through her fingers. But she hadn't lost herself. And this time, she wouldn't let anyone steal the last pieces of her family's legacy. The hidden heir was no longer just a secret buried in shadows. He was a beacon of truth, and Olivia's fiercest reason to fight. The courtroom was silent when the verdict was read. Olivia barely breathed as the judge's voice echoed off the high ceilings. "Valerie Monroe is found guilty of fraud, conspiracy to defraud an estate, and obstruction of justice." A gasp rippled through the gallery. Olivia didn't move. She simply stared ahead, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white, heart steady. Valerie stood just feet away, no longer the glamorous sister who had graced magazine covers as the other woman of a billionaire, but a pale, shell-shocked version of herself. Her signature smirk was gone. Her designer clothes looked out of place on someone so exposed, and yet Olivia felt no triumph. The road to this moment had been paved with heartbreak. The justice system had done its part. Valerie's web of lies unraveled under the weight of evidence. Falsified hospital documents, secret payments tied to Isabella's death, and testimonies from those she'd intimidated or bribed. The real story had come to light. The truth had finally been spoken aloud, but it hadn't brought Olivia peace, at least not the kind she once imagined. She had spent months clawing her way through layers of betrayal, deception, and grief. She had buried the man she once loved, only to discover he had buried his secrets far deeper. She had confronted her sister, her past, and even herself. And now, she stood at the edge of something new. Later that week, custody of baby Michael, his son, not Valerie's, was granted to Olivia. Not because she demanded it, but because she was the only person left who could protect him, who wouldn't use him as a pawn in some twisted power game. She held him in her arms for the first time with no fear, no uncertainty, just awe. He looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. He had Nathaniel's dimpled chin, but Isabella's soulful gaze. He was innocent of all of it. A soft breeze drifted through the nursery window as she whispered, "You didn't ask for any of this, but I promise, I will never make you pay for the sins of others." She meant every word. In the following weeks, Olivia began to rebuild. Not just the mansion that had become a mausoleum of memories, but her spirit. The media coverage eventually faded, the headlines replaced by fresher scandals, and the whispers around town grew quieter. She donated a portion of the estate to fund women's shelters, one of them named after Isabella Marquez. As for Valerie, she appealed the sentence, but her influence had crumbled. Her empire of illusions was gone. Olivia visited her once, just once, in jail. They didn't scream, they didn't cry. Valerie looked at her with hollow eyes and muttered, "You always win, don't you?" Olivia replied softly, "No. Nobody wins when love is used as a weapon. But someone has to stop the bleeding." She walked out of that cold visiting room and never looked back. Months later, on a quiet morning, Olivia watched Michael play in the garden. He giggled as butterflies danced around him, his joy untouched by the chaos he'd been born into. In that moment, Olivia realized she hadn't just survived, she had healed. And in her arms, she carried not just the weight of a broken past, but the strength of a future she had chosen to write on her own terms, a future built not on lies, but on truth, not on revenge, but on grace. And finally, peace.